Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners!
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are glad you're joining us this week. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you have been here with us for a while, we are so appreciative.
Yes, either way, thanks for joining us today. And I think that we should just get right into it.
Christy can't wait to talk about this case.
I actually am very excited. My last case was a real doozy, and this one, I mean, murder is terrible no matter what, but this one I feel like might be a little bit easier for me to talk about because the last one was so gruesome. But as you all know, here in North America, Easter is upon us. Regarding Easter, I have to ask Melissa a question, and I bet most of you who have been listening to us for a while will know what her answer will be, because I'm fairly certain her answer will be the same as mine.
I can probably answer without you even asking. Is the answer both?
No, actually, it's not. But that was a really good guess because it's always both. No, my question was, aside from the religious and family aspect of celebrating Easter, what is the best part about this particular holiday?
Chocolate.
Yes, the chocolate.
What's your favorite chocolate?
For Easter chocolate?
Yeah.
It's definitely the Cadbury.
Mini eggs?
Yes.
The candy-coated ones?
Yes.
Oh, see, they are not my favorite.
You're crazy woman because they're so good.
Hey, I like the Lindt.
What?
Yes, just chocolate.
Lindt is for Christmas. I get the Lindt balls for Christmas. But I'm happy you didn't say the cream eggs.
Oh.
Because them are nasty. Sorry, you guys. But this girl has to be super desperate for a chocolate hit before I would eat one of those.
No, they are not my favorite at all.
No, Cadbury mini eggs. Amazing.
No, I just now go to the Lindt store and buy the 100 Lindts and hide those.
I do that at Christmas. That's become our Christmas thing. Because they go on sale at Christmas. And as you all know, we're cheap over here.
They go on sale at Easter too, though.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
No, I'd still rather have the Cadbury.
No. We disagree on this, listeners.
That's okay. But it could be both. Because I do like the Lindt. So we could eat both. I'd be okay with that. If you are a returning listener, you know that Melissa and I try to find cases to go along with the holidays as we approach them. And when I was looking for a case to cover this week, I thought I would go in a little bit of a different direction. Instead of picking a case that took place on or around Easter, I thought I would choose a case that involves the star, aside from Jesus, of the holiday. One of my all-time favorite chocolate treats, as I mentioned, at Easter are the Cadbury mini eggs. If you've ever had them, I'm sure you can understand why. But a large bag now costs over $20 in Canada. So instead of buying my favorite chocolate treat this year, I'm going to tell you about a case where the murder weapon is actually chocolate.
Is it poisoning?
It is. And a little side note, surprisingly, this isn't the only case that I found about chocolate being used to kill someone. So perhaps I'll bring the other case to you at a later date.
Death by chocolate.
Yes, is a real thing.
It is.
With this case that I picked out, I will now have brought you more female than male cases so far this year. This isn't planned, just how it's working out. Perhaps I'm embracing my feminine energy in 2025. And as an extra treat for Melissa, this case is also an old-timey one. It starts in the 1800s and ends when our dirtbag passes away in 1907.
Love these ones.
I know. Here's your Easter present.
Thank you.
So grab your chocolate, listeners, and settle in for a case filled with sweet treats, lust, jealousy, scandal, and betrayal. Dun dun dun.
Sounds intriguing. Can't wait to listen.
Okay, well, good thing you get to right now. You don't even have to wait, Melissa.
Just cut all that
out. You get to hear it before everybody else.
I'm so tired, Christy. I'm so tired.
Melissa gets to hear it live. Oh, maybe that's something we should do in the future. Crazy. Okay. Christiana Edmunds was born on October 2nd or 3rd 1828, in Margate, Kent, England. So almost 200 years ago. Christiana's mother was Anne Christian Byrne, sister of John Southerton Byrne. He sounds like he was kind of a big deal in England's history, so I thought I would mention him. John was Christiana's uncle on her mother's side. He was said to be an English solicitor, an antiquary, who was the quote-unquote backbone of the parish registers, first releasing his work in 1829. He practiced lower court law, and if I understood it correctly, he was pivotal in creating the registries for lawyers. Christiana's grandfather on this side was a Royal Marines captain, and it was said that Christiana was raised in a privileged family. All of this privilege didn't just come from her mother's side of the family. Christiana's father was William Edmunds. He started out as a carpenter and later became a very successful architect. If you are from the area, he actually designed the Holy Trinity Church in Margate, completed in 1835, as well as the lighthouse that was completed in 1829. The church was demolished after World War II, but I believe that the lighthouse is still standing.
Sounds like quite the family history she had.
There was a lot of family history, so I am going into it a little bit. Her father has also been highly admired for his creation of the Boulevard, Levy's Bazaar, and ironically, he designed the workhouse in Herne, which opened in 1836 and housed 420 inmates. William was so admired that when Dover hosted a dinner for the Duke of Wellington, William was hired to design a special pavilion on the Priory Meadows in 1839. I read a description of this, and it sounds stunning. William also drew the first detailed street map of Margate in 1821, which I believe you can still view at the East Kent Archive Office. Of course, there are many more projects that William was given credit for, and his family were quite interesting to research. I could have went on to his siblings, but I have to keep this in a time frame for you. The Kentish Gazette wrote an article about William Edmunds and said that he was given the highest credit at a young age. And I decided to include this bit of information about Christiana's family because, for one, it can be hard to find history information dating back 2 centuries, and 2, because it shows that Christiana had a good life. Her parents and extended family were good and successful people who helped to make the communities that they lived in a better place. It is unfortunate that we cannot say the same about Christiana. Christiana was born the year after her parents, Anne and William, were wed. She was the eldest child, followed by 2 younger sisters, Mary and Louisa, and then finally a younger brother, Arthur. Things sounded wonderful for the Edmunds family, but no family is without their struggles. I read about a scandal involving William about quote-unquote false invoices regarding stone. I believe an invoice was issued before the stone had arrived, and they were accused of submitting an invoice for something not ordered, but the stone was ordered and just arrived late. But one person involved even took their own life during the investigation, so I think it was pretty brutal. From what I gather, nothing was proven to suggest that William was being shady, but he did get his pay cut after this all happened, and needless to say, there is no notable work for William after 1839 until his unfortunate death in 1847. So it kind of ruined his career.
Which is unfortunate, because it sounded like he was doing quite well.
He really was. However, his death would be used by Christiana's lawyers later to suggest that she was insane at the time of the murder. Christiana's mother would testify at her trial about how essentially mental illness was rampant in their family, although it wasn't referred to as mental illness then. So just keep in mind when I read certain quotes that this was the 1800s, and I'm going to use the verbiage that is written. I myself question Christiana's mental health in this case, so I'm going to mention some of the things presented by Anne and the lawyers regarding their family before we even get into the bread and butter of the case. First, it was said that both of Christiana's grandfathers, quote, were perfectly imbecile and were both in a state of unsound mind. There was evidence to support this in regards to Anne's father, but not William's, but this doesn't mean that he wasn't mentally unwell. Just there was no physical evidence. In regards to Anne's father, he died at the age of 43. It was said that, quote, he was paralyzed before he died and died in a fit. He had to be fastened in a chair and was quite childish before he died.
So he was having seizures.
Probably. Arthur, Christiana's little brother, experienced regular, quote-unquote, epileptic fits, starting in childhood. Anne could not properly care for him, and so he was sent to Earlswood Asylum in 1860. He died at the facility 6 years later.
We have to keep in mind that this is the 1800s.
Yes.
So it wasn't necessarily a mental health issue. They just couldn't deal with it.
Yes. And they just kind of classified all of this as mental health.
Right. Even though it was probably epilepsy.
Oh, for sure. One of Christiana's younger sisters died at the age of 36 and was said to suffer from quote-unquote hysteria. But I did read in one account that she died from taking her own life. And I believe it was Louisa.
Okay, that sounds more like mental health.
Mm-hmm. In regards to William, Christiana's father, there's a bit more information about his declining condition that led to the end of his life. About her husband, Anne said, quote, "In 1843, my husband became insane and was sent to a private lunatic asylum at Southall, where he was confined till August 1844. He was very strange in his manner a long time before he was sent there. He raved about having millions of money and attempted to knock down his medical man with a ruler. He had to be confined in a straitjacket before going to the asylum. He had 2 attendants before he was sent there. In August 1844, he returned home from considerations of expense. He was better and remained home until March 1845, when he had to be sent to the Peckham Lunatic Asylum. He remained there until March 1847, when he died in the asylum. For a considerable time before his death, he was paralyzed, though he could move. He was all drawn on one side. He was about 47 when he died."
It sounds like she has a high potential for having a family history of mental health disorders.
Definitely. And unfortunately, there is information about what was happening to her family, but not the same information that we would have today to know exactly what their diagnoses would be.
Right.
The asylum's proprietor said about William that he was a dangerous lunatic. He said that William was upset about the sale of a house. He was violent, restless, spoke nonsense, and became paralyzed during his last 3 years of life. Interestingly, I did read that the second asylum that William went to was nowhere near as nice as the first. It was said to be overpopulated and understaffed. And I think that's because, as Anne said in her statement, is he had to come home for a while because of the expense. And so the next place he went to was not as nice of a facility.
That makes sense.
And he declined a lot. Christiana was also said to be diagnosed with hysteria while in her 20s. In 1853, when she would have been around the age of 25, Christiana had an episode of paralysis on one side. This paralysis affected her feet, and she couldn't walk for a time. I do want to make a disclaimer that around this time, hysteria was one of the most common diagnoses of a female disorder. This diagnosis was often given if a woman was irritable, had a sex drive, and, quote, had a tendency to cause trouble for others. So basically, if you were a woman and you had an opinion, a healthy libido, or displayed emotions, you were hysteric.
It's the times.
Yes. So if she's a problem, she's not just sitting pretty and keeping her mouth closed and her legs closed. She has to be diagnosed with hysteria.
That's so funny.
That's what I got from it as I was researching. So take this with a grain of salt.
We were killing ourselves laughing the other day, listening to some radio shows from the 1950s and how the women were portrayed in them was hilarious.
Right?
Yes.
Something has to be mentally wrong with her if she has an opinion and enjoys getting down once in a while.
Yeah. Well, I have said it before. The ads from these old-timey cases just crack me up.
Right?
They're hilarious. You can see when you research these cases just how prevalent those ideas were.
Oh, there was not a lot of research or care into women's health at that time. If you were a bother, something was wrong with you. And the ads you're talking about were like from the 50s. This is middle of 1800s. So you can imagine how much worse it would have been 100 years prior to that.
Yep.
But despite the family issues, Christiana was raised comfortably. She attended a private boarding school and received an education at Chapel Place and Ramsgate.
That in and of itself is pretty rare for that time.
Yes, absolutely. Not a lot of women had that privilege at the time. And she was also said to be quite beautiful. So she had a lot going for her. Not that looks matter, but in 1850 it did.
When your sole purpose was to get a husband.
Yes. After her father died, when she was around the age of 31, Christiana decided to move in with her mother and her last standing sibling, which I believe was Mary. First, they are recorded as living in Canterbury, Kent, but eventually moved to 16 Gloucester Place in Brighton. The 3 women were said to live comfortably, but some said that Christiana was bored with her privileged life. But that definitely changed when she met Dr. Charles Beard in 1869.
A doctor?
A doctor! Well, Dr. Charles had a practice and lived near Christiana's home at 64 Grand Parade. Charles became Christiana's doctor, and Christiana quickly became obsessed with him. It was said that the young woman fell madly in love with the man. However, there was a giant hiccup standing in her way. The handsome doctor had a wife. Christiana was determined, and she was not about to let another woman stand in between her and her man. As we get into this case, I do have to say that Dr. Charles Beard denied ever having a sexual relationship with Christiana. This is a highly debated fact in the case, but I say let's also take that with a grain of salt. It is said that the doctor and Christiana were seen flirting with one another, which would have been scandalous enough, but they were also said to exchange some pretty steamy love letters and eventually began a physical relationship. Remember that hysteria could have meant that a woman has a healthy sex drive, so the poor doctor didn't stand a chance.
No choice.
The evil woman made me do it. She batted those eyelashes at me.
Her womanly wiles got me.
Right? At the time, the letters were described as being, quote, in such an affectionate strain. Charles admitted to the flirting and letters, but denied the sexual relationship. Is this true? Maybe. Was he just trying to save face and his marriage? Also maybe. What we do know for sure is that Christiana thought that it would be a good idea to get rid of the pesky wife so that she could have Charles all to herself. The following year, after meeting Charles, in September of 1870, Christiana came up with a plan to rid herself of the competition. The particulars aren't 100% clear, but what we do know is that Christiana purchased chocolates and injected them with a poison. She then showed up at the Beard home and gave the chocolates to Charles's wife, Emily, and she ate one. Emily said that the chocolate tasted quote-unquote disagreeable. After ingesting the chocolate, Emily became extremely ill, but miraculously, she survived the poisoning. Charles would later say that he suspected Christiana of poisoning his wife, but he decided not to say anything because it would become a scandal. Basically, if he voiced his suspicions, his dirty little secret would come out, and he didn't want any of what was happening between him and Christiana to be made public. Plus, how would he explain to Emily that he was the reason that she almost died? This makes me believe that he was having an affair with Christiana, and not just engaging in a little flirting now and then.
He just wanted to protect his reputation.
I think so. He was the community doctor. But in my opinion, if you genuinely thought that someone was trying to kill your spouse, wouldn't you speak up in case they made a second attempt? To me, Dr. Charles Beard was a cowardly dirtbag for staying silent. His secret to him was more important than the welfare of his wife.
Because she goes on to make a second attempt.
She does. What I personally think happened is that Christiana wanted Charles to leave his wife, and when he refused, she took matters into her own hands. However you slice it, Christiana going undetected for attempted murder was a grave mistake, which ultimately led to another person's death. Although unsuccessful at her first attempt, it would seem that Christiana developed the appetite for poisoning, and she would strike again the following year, and on multiple occasions.
More than just one?
Yes. We know that poisoning is a murder method more often chosen by women, but what I didn't know, that I learned through my research into this case, is that during the 1800s, Victorians were especially afraid of female poisoners. It was said to be the #1 feared method of killing at the time. It was said that the fear came from the stark contrast of the act of poisoning and a woman's inherent nature and role in society, especially as a loving daughter, wife, and mother. How could a meek and mild woman do something so terrible? In 1851 and 1868, the Victorian legislation tried to make it harder for women to get their hands on poisons, but this attempt seemed to have very little effect in actuality.
Right. Poisoning is in contrast to what a woman's role would have been at that time, because they were the caregiver. So if anybody was going to be treating your illnesses or taking care of you, it would have been a woman at home.
Yes. And if you were a child or a man, you were not preparing your own food. That was all done by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't even make yourself a sandwich. That was her job.
Right.
Although it isn't the poison that Christiana would go on to use, people were especially afraid of arsenic at that time because it's tasteless, colorless, and odorless. If you ingest it, by the time you knew, it would be too late. This fear caused what was termed, quote, the poisoning panic. One journalist during the time of this panic wrote, quote, it seems almost clear that a woman who would not lift her hand against a man or child will unhesitantly drop arsenic into their food. So she won't be violent, but she'll still kill you. You would think that a hysteria about poisoning would mean that guys were dropping like flies from the women around them, but this was not the case. When I looked into how many poisonings took place between 1883 and 1892, a 9-year span, 6,616 people died from poisonings in England and Wales. However, more than half of those were accidental, a large number were suicides, and only 42 of those were murders. My guess is that a lot of people may have assumed that some of those accidental or on-purpose poisonings were actually orchestrated by quote-unquote hysterical women. They were really afraid, it sounded like.
Well, you can see how their anticipation of or their fear of being poisoned would just lead to more hysteria about being poisoned or poisonings taking place.
Yes. And if a man accidentally was poisoned, oh, did his wife do it? You would immediately turn to her. For this reason, it was stated about poisoning in a great article by Dr. Robin Joyce that, quote, it wasn't just a crime against society, it was a crime against morality. It was an inversion of the natural state of women as wives and mothers, and it stank of deception and betrayal. With one failed attempt under her petticoat, Christiana decided that she would give it another go. Some people believe that Christiana just went mad and went on an attempted killing spree. Others suggest that Christiana knew that Charles suspected her of poisoning his wife. So, in an attempt to win him over, she decided to poison more people so he would know that she was innocent.
Oh, so she's going to hide it.
Yes, I think this is how she's going to try to cover up her actions.
You know what always shocks me about these old-time cases is that people's ideas haven't changed that much. Like, we see the same kind of motive, the same kind of dirtbaggery through the years.
It's true.
Like, if we look at other poisonings, how many times do they try and poison other people to hide the single poisoning? I'm thinking about the dad that killed his kids on Halloween. He handed out other candy to hide the fact that he was killing his own kids.
Right. The pixie sticks.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
It always shocks me how often we see these kind of repetitive themes. Like, they're really not new ideas.
I guess murder has been going on for hundreds of years.
A little scary.
In 1871, Christiana went to her local chemist, Isaac Garrett, and asked to purchase strychnine. It is unsure if this was the same poison she gave to Emily, but I have a feeling that was a different one, her first attempt. Christiana explained to the chemist that she needed the poison to get rid of some stray cats on her property. At first, Isaac denied Christiana's request to purchase the poison, but then she sobbed to him about how she had a garden and the cats were destroying it. She also told Isaac that she was married but didn't have any children, so there was no risk of any children accidentally ingesting any of it. That was a lie. She was not married, but she didn't have any children. That part was true.
Why did being married make her more reputable?
Well, it would have. She's not just this old, cranky spinster. I'm married. I have a husband. I'm just making a garden so I can provide.
But it's all the husbands that are worried about being poisoned by their wives.
That's true. Either way, it worked. After being sweet-talked, despite the stricter legislation, this chemist believed the tall, beautiful woman and sold her what she requested. Easy peasy. Besides, strychnine was most commonly used to kill rodents and other small pests, so it was a believable story. When I looked up strychnine, I learned that it is a very strong poison. A small amount is all it takes to cause serious effects in people. Strychnine is a white, odorless, bitter crystalline powder, and is said to be one of the worst poisons to die from. 10 to 20 minutes after ingesting the poison, your muscles will start to spasm, starting in your head and neck and then spreading to every muscle in your body. Your body will begin to convulse almost continuously until it gets so bad that your backbone stays arched. These convulsions are said to lead to lactic acidosis, hyperthermia, which is super high temperature, and rhabdomyolysis, which means when damaged skeletal muscle breaks down rapidly, causing pain, weakness, vomiting, rapid heart rate, and confusion. This is all followed by post-acute depression, which is drowsiness, confusion, nausea, hypertension, headache, or migraine. A person ultimately dies from asphyxiation caused by paralysis of the breathing pathways or from extreme exhaustion from the violent convulsions. This process, start to finish, can take up to 3 hours.
I've heard that it is quite horrific.
Yes, this substance does sound horrible. And now it was in the hands of a dirtbag. Everything I read said it is one of the worst ones to die from. Next, Christiana decided that she would try to frame the well-known local confectioner of Brighton, John Maynard. And a side note, I tried to look it up, but I am unsure if this is the same Maynard candy brand that we know and still love in Canada. It was a little confusing because Cadbury did purchase Maynard candy, known for its wine gums, and Cadbury's first name was also John, so I really don't know, but I hope it's the same. If someone knows, please let us know.
That is a cool connection.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but could be the same Maynard. Regardless, though, Christiana wanted to frame John Maynard for poisoning his customers, essentially getting herself off the hot seat with Charles. Not wanting to be seen near the confection shop, Christiana ended up paying a few boys in March of 1871 to go into the store and purchase bags of chocolate creams for her, which are just chocolates filled with creamy fillings like we typically buy in boxes. Once she had the chocolate creams in hand, Christiana carefully injected them with the strychnine poison. Trying to be sneaky at first, Christiana went into different shops in Brighton and left some of the poison treats laying around in hopes that customers or staff would eat them, and they would trace the chocolates back to John Maynard. Unsurprisingly, no one took the bait and ate random chocolates that they found lying around different shops. This wasn't Elf and the gum. But this did mean that Christiana had to get sneakier. She thought, oh, I'll just leave little chocolates all around town.
People are just going to pick up little brown things and eat them.
I'm actually kind of surprised at least one person didn't do it.
A child, right?
Yes.
I can totally see a kid doing it.
Yes, but it didn't work. So instead, Christiana hired a small boy to purchase a bag of chocolate creams for her from John Maynard's shop. When he returned with the bag of goodies, Christiana told him that they were too big and asked him to go back and exchange them for the smaller ones. What the little boy didn't realize is that when Christiana was quote-unquote inspecting the chocolate creams, she handed him back a different, identical-looking bag, a bag that she had already infused with strychnine.
She's getting a little bit more trickier.
Yes. The boy took the poison confections back to Maynard's. John took the bag back and exchanged them for the smaller chocolates. Remember that this was 1871. Chocolates were a treat, and there weren't the same health and safety protocols in place like there are now. The bag of chocolates didn't appear to be opened, and so John put them back on his shelves to be purchased by someone else. From my understanding, Christiana did this more than once, and many people became ill from unknowingly eating the contaminated treats.
But they didn't die?
No, not at first. But one person did. Sadly, only a few months after hatching her chaotic plan, on June 12, 1871, a little boy ate one of her poisoned chocolate creams. His name was Sidney Albert Barker, and he was only 4 years old. His uncle had purchased the chocolates from John Maynard's shop and shared them with his family while they were on a holiday. Sidney was reportedly dead within only a half hour after eating the laced goods. His tiny body could not fight off the deadly effects of strychnine.
So she had to have done this a few times.
She did.
And I'm wondering if she's increasing the concentration of strychnine each time she's putting them back on the shelf because people were only getting sick originally and now they're dying.
Right. And I think maybe at the time the chocolates were saved for the adults. That was an expensive little treat. And so maybe a lot of kids hadn't had them and his little body couldn't metabolize it. And I really tried to find more information about Sidney, but unfortunately couldn't find any of his background information. Just that he was on holiday. His uncle was like, I'm going to buy chocolates to share, and gave the little boy one. And half an hour later, he passed away.
Did they relate it to the chocolates right away?
They do. And we're going to get into all of that. But I did want to point out that it is unclear if Christiana knew that she could potentially kill someone. Emily and others had just gotten sick. Perhaps murder wasn't her ultimate plan after attempting to kill Emily. However, it was a risk that she ultimately took. I personally think she tried to kill Emily, but since it didn't work, she thought it would just make the other victims sick. I don't think she was banking on a child eating one of the chocolates, or perhaps she did and just didn't care. Either way, it was a risk she selfishly was willing to take.
Yeah, she was a dirtbag.
Absolutely. An inquest was opened against John Maynard and his shop because the chocolate obviously was traced back to his establishment. Christiana decided to insert herself into this inquest to speak out against the candy shop owner. She claimed that she had also purchased chocolate creams from his shop and became violently ill from them.
It almost reminds you of an arsonist. How they have to be in the middle of the aftermath to see what's actually happening.
Right. It also shows just how desperate she was to pin this on John. Mm-hmm. She just really wanted to be able to clear her name with the doctor. The case against John went to trial, but the jury decided that the death of 4-year-old Sydney Barker was accidental and not intentional. This infuriated Christiana. Next, she decided to try and tug at Sydney's father's heartstrings and guilt him into taking more action. Christiana took it upon herself to send 3 separate letters to Sydney's father. In the letters, she urged Mr. Barker to take further action against Mr. Maynard. She expressed that he was a negligent parent if he did not pursue the matter and would be responsible for any further deaths that occurred at the hand of John Maynard. And I thought, how wretched. This poor man who was grieving his son. Christiana signed these letters as, quote, an old inhabitant and a seeker for justice, quote, CGB, which I thought could this stand for Charles Beard, and, quote, a London tradesman, now a visitor at Brighton. So they were all sent anonymously. This deceptive plan didn't work, but Christiana wouldn't or couldn't leave it alone. Sometime in August, she purchased 2 fruit cakes and laced them with the strychnine. And I believe this was still from John Maynard's shop.
Yeah, because it wouldn't make any sense to now start to frame somebody else. She had to go with this story.
Yes. She sent one of the cakes to a woman named Mrs. Boyes, and the other cake she sent to Mrs. Beard, Dr. Charles Beard's wife. She also sent a fruit basket laced with the poison to Isaac Garrett, the chemist who sold her the strychnine.
She's covering her tracks.
She is. I assume she was hoping that the chemist would die and not be able to point any fingers at her later. And I assume bits of each of these items were consumed, and that is how they knew that they were poisoned. Christiana tried to cover all of her bases by sending herself some of the poisoned chocolates as well, just in case she was questioned. So then they would be at her house. Look, someone sent me these. After the second attempted murder of his wife, the doctor finally decided to speak up about his suspicion against Christiana. He went to police and told them that he thought Christiana, a woman obsessed with him, had tried to poison his wife, Mrs. Boyes, the chemist, and succeeded in killing 4-year-old Sydney Barker. The police took this claim seriously and arrested Christiana, but at first just on 2 counts of attempted murder for the 2 women.
What? A child wasn't worth it?
Well, they had to look into it. So the initial charge was just for the 2 women, but after digging more into the case, police eventually did charge Christiana with the murder of Sydney. Word spread quickly, and this case soon became a huge sensation, especially during the time of the poisoning panic.
Well, this just confirms everybody's fears.
Right? All the men would have been like, see, we told you, it's the women, the hysterical women. Believing that Christiana would not be able to receive a fair trial in Brighton because of how sensationalized the case was, her trial was moved to the Central Criminal Court, or the Old Bailey, in London. Her trial began in January of 1872, and the courtroom was packed. It was described in a way that sounded very theatrical to me. A designated spot for the poor, a better area for the rich, a bustle of reporters, a 10-person jury, and then all the police, lawyers, and court staff. I just love how the newspapers reported things back then.
Oh, it was like a whole spectacle.
Oh, absolutely. Christiana entered the courtroom in all black velvet trimmed with fur. Not what you typically assume a murderer would look like. And I mention this because a large focus was placed on Christiana's appearance. At the time, how a person looked said a lot in regards to if they could be a murderer or not, especially in their facial features.
Yes, this is right. Because this is when craniometry was huge. Do you remember in the William Corder case where they measured his skull afterwards and determined all of these things about his character?
Right. And they really believed it at the time.
Yeah, it wasn't discredited yet.
No, they thought it was a real science. So there was a lot of focus on the way this woman looked. I will read a statement published about Christiana during her trial. It definitely has a sexualized tone to it. It's a little long, but bear with me, because I can't imagine if this is how newspapers reported on murder suspects today. Plus, it's actually very beautifully written. And it goes very much in line with this craniometry that you're talking about. So the article read, quote, "Short of stature, even though I read that she was considered tall, attired in somber velvet, bareheaded, with a certain self-possessed demureness in her bearing, rather careworn, hard-featured woman of 35 or thereabouts." She actually would be turning 45 that year.
Oh, so she was young looking for her age.
She was a good-looking woman. The face is plain, decidedly plain, the complexion rather dark, and some color underlying the swathiness. The forehead and whole forefront of the head is large and projects with somewhat exceptional prominence. The dark hair, parted down the center, is lightly drawn back and coiled in a heavy plaited knot round the back part of the crown. The face gains character as one studies it minutely. There is considerable character in its upper features, spite of the plainness. The quick flash of the large dark eye, once noted, suffices to blot out the first conception of commonplace. But the character of the face lies in the lower features. The profile is irregular, but not unpleasing. The upper lip is long and convex, mouth slightly projecting, chin straight, long and cruel. The lower jaw heavy, massive, and animal in its development. The lips are loose, almost pendulous, the lower one being fullest and projecting, and the mouth is exceptionally large. From the configuration of the lips, the mouth might be thought weak, but a glance at the chin removes any such impression.
Quite the write-up, eh?
I actually was obsessed with this write-up, and it goes into more detail, but I had to include this part about her face because the way it was discussed a lot about how he describes her mouth, and she was just very sultry and, trying to bring you in.
Oh, interesting.
With those nice full lips that were opened so slightly.
It's not judgmental at all. Animalistic jaw.
Right? Yeah.
It's interesting how many things that he picks out of her appearance that actually go along with traits that they had already attributed to other criminals, like the large lower jaw, the prominent projection of the forehead.
Mm-hmm.
So funny. He's just pointing it all out.
Right. It just meant the girl had good bone structure. Most of us would love a jawline like that. Yeah. It's just really interesting how things were done back then.
Mm-hmm.
And the prosecution during this trial was able to use the letters that Christiana had sent to Mr. Barker and Dr. Beard as evidence against her because the handwriting matched. But this was really one of the only forms of real hard concrete evidence that I could find in the trial. Not saying that there wasn't more, but there wasn't a lot more discussed.
Well, forensics weren't the same.
No, of course. Dr. Beard claimed that Christiana was basically obsessed with him and tried to murder his wife when he told her to stop writing him love letters. On the flip side, the defense that was used to try and help Christiana is an interesting one. They said yes, she poisoned chocolate creams with strychnine, but there was no way to prove that Sydney Barker consumed one of the chocolates that she prepared, that they could have been done by anyone. To which I say, not bloody likely, Christiana. Well, she did poison chocolates, but you can't prove that she poisoned those chocolates. But they decided to cover their butts just in case this defense didn't work. Christiana's lawyer stated about their client that, quote, her moral sense is almost entirely gone from her, and that she does not understand the difference between right and wrong. So basically the insanity plea. Hence why her mother and others testified about the mental health instability that ran in their bloodline.
Okay, but what behaviors did Christiana have that showed that?
Well, she was diagnosed as hysterical.
Yes. So any other things?
No, she was this hysterical woman. That's bad enough, Melissa. She had an opinion and she'd like to make out. And sometimes she would cause trouble.
Well, she is a dirtbag, so she is causing trouble.
She is. And I don't know everything, all of the different reasons. I could not find the medical report when she was diagnosed as hysterical. Just there was that one episode where she was partially paralyzed for a while, couldn't walk. I couldn't find any more details about that.
But it wasn't like people were reporting she ran her mouth off all the time over crazy things or...
No. She wasn't pulling an Ed Gein and dancing in the moonlight wearing skin.
Okay. She wasn't up on the soapbox in the middle of the street.
No.
Warning about aliens.
No, I think she just was obsessed with Dr. Beard. But it made sense that they would use this also as their defense.
Right. They had to try something.
Absolutely. However, this defense did not work. And only after 1 hour exactly, the jury came back with a guilty verdict. And Christiana was given the sentence of death. From the research that I did, hanging was the method of capital punishment at that time in England. But a fun fact that I learned, until 1726, if a woman was found guilty of murdering her husband, she was burned at the stake.
Because they thought she was a witch.
It was said that Christiana gave no visible reaction to hearing her fate. But when the judge asked her if there was any reason that her execution should be stayed, she answered that there was a possibility that she could be with child.
Of course.
It was quickly confirmed by 2 different doctors that Christiana was not pregnant. But can you imagine the shock and awe that this juicy little lie would have caused in 1872?
Well, because whose baby was it? Was it the doctor's?
Well, if Charles and her had been intimate, I bet he almost choked. I would have liked to have been a fly in that courtroom when she said it. It gives off Chicago vibes. I just thought that would have been a very interesting moment in the courtroom. Especially if he was present.
Oh, it totally would have been.
Yeah. Because I really do think they were having a sexual relationship. Maybe they weren't, but I kind of lean towards that. Or she was just obsessive and was basically a stalker. But he was seen flirting with her too. So either way, it wasn't a good scenario. And then finally he was like, this has to stop. So I don't know if he was like, wait, this is going too far. I don't want to have a sexual relationship. Or he had had his fun with her and was like, okay, I don't want my wife to find out. We're done. Although Christiana was sentenced to swing from the gallows, that is not what ended up happening. Not long at all after being sentenced to death, the Home Secretary determined that Christiana Edmunds was in fact insane. She was instead ordered to live out her life at the infamous Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum. She was actually the first female prisoner to enter there who had initially been sentenced to death.
That is interesting.
Uh-huh. Christiana entered Broadmoor on July 5th, 1872, and would go on to live another 35 years there. She died there in 1907 of, quote, old age, when she would have been around 79 years old.
And did she get really crazy when she was there?
Oh, I found some good information about while she was there. I'm excited to share this next part. From different accounts that I read, it sounded like Christiana would glam it up by wearing rouge and large wigs, and was described as being not only vain, but sexually charged around the male guards, as well as around the chaplain. Christiana was nicknamed, quote, the Painted Lady by the male staff, and allegedly, at a Christmas dance held at the facility, they were all lined up to dance with her. It was said that Christiana's sister, Mary, would send her packages that would have contraband, like the makeup and the wigs, hidden inside other items. And this made a lot of the other inmates jealous and fed up with Christiana. I was able to find a very interesting document from Broadmoor about Christiana's stay there, and I'm happy to say that she was not described as a model prisoner. They had to put up with her for 35 years there.
That's a long time. She lived for a long time.
She did. She was in her prime when she would have been locked up.
45? Just past your prime, no?
No!
Well, maybe not now, but like back then, she lived for a long time, considering she lived in the late 1800s.
Yeah, she was born like earlier 1800s.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. But she was a beautiful woman. They all thought she was younger than she was. She knew what to use, what the good Lord gave her. Instead of being described as a model prisoner, some of the sentiments about her included, quote, she deceives for the pure love of deception, and, quote, her delight and amusement seemed to be in practicing the art of ingeniously tormenting several of the more irritable patients so that she could always complain of their language to her whilst it was difficult to bring any overt act home to herself.
She's a podster.
She is. She knew how to push people's buttons and she would kind of do it for fun. And then she would get them in trouble. Did you hear what she just said to me? She used profanity. How dare.
So this all tells me that she's not insane at all.
Oh, I don't think that she is. Although she was a poop disturber and a little scandalous, it was reported that she never really displayed any behaviors that would support the ideology of her being of an unsound mind. That was in the Broadmoor report.
Yeah.
They're like, no.
Why did they keep her there then and not ship her off into a normal prison?
Her sentence had been commuted to life at Broadmoor, and that's just where she stayed.
Yeah, but it was commuted that way because she was ruled insane.
Right.
But she's clearly not insane. The hospital's saying she's not insane.
No.
So ship her off to another prison.
Yeah. Mind you, from my research of Broadmoor, that wasn't a picnic to be there either.
You don't think it was better than other prisons?
I don't know.
At the time? Work prisons?
I don't know, honestly, which would have been worse.
It would have been difficult to house a female inmate, though.
Definitely. But I think she was enjoying the male to female ratio.
Oh, it sounds like it.
Yes. There is a quote that I want to read about the end of Christiana's life at Broadmoor. And this is what was in the report. It said, quote, "As the years went by, her remaining family died, and she was left alone at Broadmoor. Gradually, her own health weakened. In 1900, she was bedridden for a while with the flu. By 1901, her sight was fading badly, and she could barely see out of her right eye. She rallied in the time to attend the asylum's annual ball in 1902, but her mobility decreased, and by 1906, she could hardly walk to anywhere. As she entered the last year of her life, a final Christmas ball approached, laid up in the infirmary, and closely observed by the medical Broadmoor, revealed a snippet of conversation between her and another patient, which was entered into her case notes. Edmunds, how am I looking? The response, fairly well. Edmunds, are my eyebrows all right? Answer, yes. Edmunds, I think I'm improving. I hope I shall be better in a fortnight. If so, I shall astonish them. I shall get up and dance. I was a Venus before, and I shall be a Venus again. She died 9 months later on the 19th of September, 1907. The cause of death was given as senile decay or old age.
Isn't Venus the goddess of fertility?
Oh, look that up. I'm not sure.
Venus is the goddess of love, beauty, sex, fertility, and victory.
There you go. So at 78, she was saying, I was a Venus then and I'm a Venus still.
That's right. So I'm going that she did have a high sex drive.
It sounds like she did. And I know that it was said that she was flirty with the male staff and people there, but I think she was still getting her itch scratched here and there. I don't think she was celibate for that 35 years. And that is the case of a wretched and selfish dirtbag who was willing to go to any length to keep her lover, even murdering a little boy. The possibly insane Christiana Edmunds.
I don't think she's insane.
I don't think so. But I do want our listeners to weigh in. Tell us, was she a woman scorned by her cheating lover? Or was she a stalker who became obsessed with her doctor? Was she insane? Did she get her just comeuppance? This has been highly debated since 1871 and still is today. So let us know what side of the fence you lie.
And we'll be back again next week with another dirtbag we can discuss as well.
Absolutely. Hope you'll join us then.
See ya.
Bye. I hit record, a truck goes by.
Get my brain working. Sorry, do you need a better intro into that? Because you're going to cut all that out, right?
Yeah, that's going in the bloopers, baby. Christiana's grandfather. What are you reading?
All the headlines, Christy.
Oh, all the news headlines? Yeah, that'll depress us.
What did they do to me? They just,
right?
They just knock me up.
Not in the literal sense. They crack you up.
Yeah, they crack me up. That's what I'm going to say. Fell out of my pants.
I'm going to edit that out. Yeah. Yeah. Don't even get me started. Yeah, I'm not going to put that in there, but don't get me started on that. I'll punch someone. I have my throat punch shirt on today, you guys. I'll do it.
Julian is my favorite.
He doesn't even know how much we love him.
Rhabdomyolysis.
Myolysis. Okay, rhabdomyolysis. Okay.
Abdomyolysis. I think we should have a Maynard snack right now, Christy.
We have any in our snack pantry? I don't think we do.
I thought the pink ones were Swedish berries, and I was going to be like, oh, you can have one. Scratch that.
Sorry. I should have made sure.
What was it called? What the heck is that called, Christy? Totally gives off Chicago vibes.
Yeah.
I was thinking like Chicago LAPD or Chicago Fire. And I was like, what? I don't know that storyline.
No, Chicago the musical.
Yes, now I know.
Yeah.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.